William spent a long time choosing a place where he would spend the rest of his life. He retired, but still had to work even after retiring. He wanted to work, but he understood that his hands were not as precise anymore, and his eyes weren't as sharp either. So as soon as a replacement was found for him, he said goodbye to everyone and retired. William had been in charge of the children's surgical department for 25 years. He was not just a doctor by profession, he was a doctor sent by God. He saved so many human lives, especially those of children, that it was impossible to count. William had a lot of awards, certificates, and a dream. He wanted to spend his old age in the countryside. He wanted to buy a small cozy house with a lake or river nearby so he could go fishing. He searched for a long time for the perfect house. Finally, about 50 kilometers away from the city, he found exactly what he had been dreaming of. He dedicated his entire life to work and never started a family. When he realized this, it was already too late. He comforted himself by saying that all the children he saved were his children too. In fact, many families, those whose children he had saved, kept in touch with him. They congratulated him on holidays, asked about his health, called and visited him, saying, "William, do you need anything? Just let us know." But he just smiled and replied, "I have everything I need. Everything is good." These were completely different people. Some were factory workers who had worked their whole lives, and others were prosecutors and businessmen. The most colorful personality, however, was a criminal authority named Momo. His real name was Sam, but he was known as Momo in certain circles. Their meeting was very eventful. On that day, William was on duty. The staff surgeon had a fever and was sent home, so William took over. Since no serious patients were there, he went to the wards to wish everyone a good night and then went to his office to read a book and drink a cup of hot coffee. As soon as he entered his office, a nurse burst in. "Oh, William, hurry. They brought a boy in. His dad is waving a gun around, smashing everything." He rushed to the reception room, thinking the nurse was exaggerating, but he was wrong. It was really hot in there. A pale 8-year-old boy was lying on a stretcher, and a man with a gun was standing next to him. Nurses huddled in the corners. The man shouted, "Doctor, where's the doctor? I'll kill everyone." William trembled. He hadn't experienced something like this in a long time. "I'm a doctor. What happened?" "You? Help my son, do you hear me? If you stop waving your weapon and explain what happened, then I can help." He pushed the man aside and leaned over the boy. Gunshot wound. To the second operating room, quickly. The nurses scurried around and the boy was quickly taken down the hallway. William turned to the man. "Did you hurt him?" The man looked at the doctor in confusion, then at his own hand holding the gun. He suddenly shrank back. "No, I have a lot of guns at home. I always kept them locked up, but I forgot this time. Archie likes this kind of thing." He must have climbed into play, and then it went off. "Doctor, help!" He didn't answer and went to the operating room. The surgery lasted more than 3 hours and the boy lost a lot of blood. When he emerged, he saw a very interesting sight. A fragile, beautiful woman was slapping a huge man who, a few hours ago, was waving a gun and terrifying everyone. She was crying and hitting, and he didn't resist, didn't dodge. He just stood there, head bowed. "Young people." The woman turned and ran to him. "Archie, how is he?" "Everything is fine. The injuries are big, but he'll live. And considering he's still a child, there shouldn't be any serious consequences. There was a lot of blood loss. 2 millimeters to the left, and I wouldn't have been able to help." The woman began to settle down, and the man picked her up in his arms. "Doctor, thank you. I won't forget this." A nurse ran up to the woman with a compress. They seated her in a chair, and William turned to the thug again. "I need to call the police." "I understand. Don't worry. I'll take care of the police." He reached out his hand. "I'm Sam. You can call me Momo." William raised an eyebrow. "Momo? The same Momo?" The man smiled sheepishly. "Yeah, the same one." William snorted. "Well, then there definitely won't be any problems with the police. Everything will be settled. Come to me in about 15 minutes. I'll tell you what's what and what's needed. As you understand, our hospital is state-run, so we don't have good medicine. We, of course." But the man interrupted the doctor. "Doctor, I'll get whatever it takes, even from the other side of the earth." Then, thanks to Momo, A super modern ultrasound machine appeared in the hospital. Even the most high-end clinic in the city didn't have anything like it. Of course, Momo wanted to personally thank William, but he insisted, "If you want to thank me, buy something for the hospital." "Sure, I'll buy something. Just tell me what to get you as a gift. Do you want a mansion? Do you want a house by the sea? Just tell me what you want. I don't need anything. I live alone and I'm very happy in my apartment. Do you at least have a car and a driver's license?" "I have a license, but I never thought about getting a car. I only go fishing with my friends." "You go fishing? Well, who doesn't love it?" They had just discharged Archie when the doorbell rang at William's apartment. A young man had come. "Please sign here." "What is this?" "Well, it's like a delivery." William signed the documents and the young man handed him an envelope and keys. "Everything is registered to you, including the car. The inspection and insurance are in the glove compartment," the young man said. William didn't understand. This must be a mistake. What car? The young man named the make and model, but William only recognized a familiar combination of 3 letters in the long name. "It's a small thank you from Sam. He took his family to the sea, so he couldn't give it to you in person," the young man said before saying goodbye and running down the stairs. William stood there for a while before putting on his jacket and heading downstairs. He saw the monster right away, a huge Jeep with white wheels, and the trunk was loaded with almost everything a fisherman could need. Knowing who Sam was, William knew that trying to return the gift would be a waste of time, so he just accepted it and went fishing on his first weekend. He had a great time. The car was so comfortable that he slept in it all night and woke up well rested. Later, while choosing a house, William thought that the gift definitely played a role in his decision to move to the countryside. The house was just as William had imagined, bright blue and fairly large for a rural home. There was a well-groomed yard, a small gazebo, and a high fence made of ordinary wooden slats, but not completely solid. He immediately decided to paint it, although he hadn't chosen a color yet. After inspecting the house, garden, and outbuildings, William was satisfied. It was exactly what he needed. He didn't even haggle with the seller and made a deal. The seller asked, "Would you like a discount?" Probably out of politeness, as it's customary to haggle, but William waved his hand. "No, that's all right. Let everyone be satisfied." He returned to the city not for long. He rented out his apartment, packed his things, loaded everything into the car, and headed for freedom. He had always lived in the city, and his grandparents also lived in the city, so he didn't know what it was like to live in the countryside. On the very first day, he started organizing things, throwing away old furniture. It wasn't even half an hour before an elderly woman and man appeared on the doorstep. "Good afternoon. We are your neighbors. The yellow house across the street is ours. I'm Florence and this is my husband Ethan. Why are you doing everything alone? Neighbors are here to help." William looked amazed as Florence rolled up her sleeves, took a rag from him, and began cleaning. William turned to Ethan, who was a typical countryman with broad shoulders and hands like shovels. He was around 60, but he could still knock out a bull with his fist. "Well, let's get to it." William smiled. Everything was as it should be. Few words, lots of action. They carried out the old furniture, leaving only a large antique mirror, and started bringing in what William had brought. The movers unloaded everything into the barn, and now they had to work hard to get the furniture out through a small door. By evening, everything was shining with cleanliness. Strangely enough, the light modern furniture fit perfectly into the interior of the rural house. While they worked, they got to know each other. Florence and Ethan had lived in this village all their lives. They had 3 children who had long since moved out. They already had 5 grandchildren, one of whom was already married. One thing overshadowed Florence and Ethan's life. All their children lived in different cities, with the youngest several thousand kilometers away. True, every year all the children came to visit their parents on their birthdays. It just so happened that Florence and Ethan's birthdays were on the same day, although there was a 6-year age difference between them. They turned out to be pleasant people, and when they heard that William was interested in fishing, Florence laughed. "Well, finally, Ethan, you found a like-minded person." "Ethan, Do you like fishing? Florence beat her husband to it. Give him a chance and he'll move to the lake, to live. Ethan just croaked. Well, what are you talking about, Florence? I only fish for relaxation. Then he turned to William and asked, What kind of fishing rods do you have? William grinned and replied, I have plenty, but I don't even know how to use them. Would you like to take a look? Sure, he said. Florence immediately started gathering her things, saying, William, you must come visit us for some milk, cheese, or just to hang out. Florence left, and William led Ethan to his car, saying, It's great that we've met. I love to fish, but I've always used just one rod, and now I've been given a gift. William opened the trunk and Ethan whistled in admiration. When Florence came to chase her husband to bed, she found William and Ethan sitting on the ground, in the light of the car's headlights, discussing their fishing gear. Florence sighed. Ethan, are you coming to bed? Yes, Florence, I'm coming. Where am I going to go? You go ahead and sleep. Life for William slowly settled into the calm rural routine, and he had no regrets about his decision. Life in the countryside was more measured and slow-paced, yet somehow more important. In the village, one had to earn respect. The fact that you came from the city, that you weren't poor and didn't have alcohol problems, meant nothing. People had been living here for years without paying any attention to such things. William, however, had become an outstanding person almost overnight. The village had its own medical center where even childbirths were conducted. There was even a small hospital with 10 beds. But, as with everything else, everything was falling apart. Only a small house remained, which everyone called the ambulance station, and a young girl who had come here to work as a paramedic. Although a few items of old equipment remained, including a bed and lamps, everything had long since been written off, but the young girl had polished them up for the sake of appearances. One evening, while William was working on his fishing gear in the yard, he saw some commotion outside and realized that something was happening. He peeked through the gate and saw a crowd running towards the center of town. He joined them and soon met Florence running towards him, shouting, William, William, hurry! There's a child in trouble. William rushed to the scene and found a 6-year-old boy lying on the ground near a shop. It was clear to William that the child had fallen from a tree with his arm and leg unnaturally twisted. But that wasn't the worst part. There was a large wound on the child's neck, and his life was rapidly slipping away with every drop of dark red liquid. A bewildered woman from the local medical center was sitting nearby, and she turned to William and said, The ambulance won't arrive for another hour. The boy's mother was sitting beside him, looking at the medical worker with terrified eyes, pleading for help. Everyone knew that the boy had only about 20 minutes, or maybe half an hour, to live. William quickly assessed the situation and looked around at the crowd of people. Quick, to the medical center. Bring anything that can be used as a stretcher. The men rushed into the shop, removed the door from its hinges, carefully lifted the boy, who was no longer responding, and raced to the medical center. William saw the medical worker in her white coat looking confused, and took her by the shoulders. If you don't get your act together, the boy will die. Do you understand? She nodded, and William washed his hands while she frantically prepared the medicine, threads, and scalpel. William looked out the window and saw the boy's mother and asked, Do you know his blood type? Type 2, positive. They just did a blood test, she replied. I need someone healthy with the same blood type, exactly the same, William said. An hour later, when the ambulance arrived, the boy had awakened. He looked at William with fear in his eyes, but he was too weak to speak. The doctors were in shock that the blood vessels were successfully sutured under those conditions. Since then, the boy's mother has been praying for William, and the villagers have been respectfully greeting him, even bowing slightly. William's life became measured and very calm. From time to time, some housewives brought sour cream, berries, or fresh meat after slaughter. William always tried to pay. He had money, but the women were sincerely offended. Gradually, he realized how different the villagers were from others. Money did not rule here. No, of course, they meant a lot, but they were not above human relationships. In early spring, William and Ethan decided to install a water motor. The neighbor knew how to work with his hands, and William still had the motor from those gifts from Momo. In the yard, of course, there was complete chaos: boards, resin, axes. By evening, a very strong rain and wind started, and the men decided to postpone the matter until the morning. William had just sat down to have tea when the wind was so strong that something was banging outside. William really didn't want to go out in bad weather, but the banging continued. He had no choice but to put on his jacket and push the door. He didn't open the door completely when he saw what was banging, or rather who was banging. A girl was standing in front of him, completely naked, dirty, and bruised. She only managed to say, "Let me in, please." After these words, the girl simply fell into William's arms. Despite the fact that she was very skinny, William had a hard time holding her. Understanding that he could not cope alone, he put the girl in the hallway, covered her with a blanket, and rushed across the road. He banged on the window. "Ethan, Ethan, help!" He almost immediately jumped out onto the street, followed by Florence. They did not know what William needed, but since the word help was uttered, they immediately dropped everything and ran. When Florence saw the girl, tears welled up in her eyes. Ethan carried her to the couch, and the girl came to her senses for some time. "Please, don't call the police, I beg you." 2 hours later, the washed girl with treated wounds sat on the couch in William's robe. "Who are you?" "I'm Scarlett. How did you end up here in such weather and naked?" "I ran away." William and Ethan looked at each other. "Who did you run away from?" "It's a long story. We have plenty of time until morning, so tell us your story. And then we'll decide what to do." "I don't understand why you're so afraid of the police. 3 months ago, I was supposed to leave the orphanage. There was no other way to put it. Me and a few other girls. We all lived in the same room. I've been in the orphanage since I was very young, so I had grand plans for the new life I'd never seen before. The other girls were a bit calmer because they knew that life outside is not very heavenly. But I was lucky. I thought I was very lucky. On the day when we were supposed to leave the walls of our home, the chief of police of our city came to give us a farewell speech. It was so solemn that my heart was pounding out of my chest. He wished us all a happy journey. We were already heading to the exit when he called out to me. He said he had looked at all our certificates, talked to the teachers, and wanted to offer us to enroll in the police academy. That's when I almost fainted. I had never told anyone that this was a secret dream of mine. Of course, I wanted to. I was just daydreaming. When they told me to pack my things and leave in an hour, the girls envied me. It was such luck. We drove for a long time, and I was surprised. How could the police academy be located in the woods? But Caleb said everything was close to extreme conditions. I calmed down and even fell asleep. I woke up to Caleb's hands groping under my sweater. I tried to break free, but he hit me. I don't remember what happened next. I woke up in some windowless room with other girls. I knew some of them. They all left the orphanage a little earlier than me. One of them a year ago. I felt bad, I screamed, and banged on the door. They said it was all useless, that no one had ever escaped from there. Later, I learned everything. Our orphanage director had killed a man a year ago. He was drunk at the time and faced a long sentence. The police chief saved him, and the orphanage director had to supply him with graduating girls. Who would look for girls like us? And Caleb didn't mind. He often came to the orphanage and always knew who would go with him. We all lived like in a harem. Those who refused were re-educated. That's how they did it to me. And how did you manage to escape? What I resisted didn't matter. 2 months later, I told the man that I was pregnant. They took me to some private hospital, and when they were driving me away, I jumped out of the car on the move. I didn't break anything, just bruised myself. While they stopped and got out, I managed to escape. I walked all night and day until I arrived here. I know they will look for me and they will find me. They won't leave me alone that easily, so I'll just rest and run in the morning. Ethan snorted. "Where will you run to? I think these people can find you anywhere. I won't give up. I'd rather they kill me." Florence cried. "Poor girl, poor girls. So there is no hope for the police now? What are we going to do?" William stood up. "Well, Let's get some sleep, Scarlett. I don't think they will start searching their homes immediately without any leads. Let's think about it for now. William wanted to show her the bed, but Scarlett was already asleep, leaning against the sofa handle. Florence looked at her husband. What are you sitting there for? Take the girl to the bed. When Scarlett was moved to the bed, which, by the way, caused a new storm of tears from Florence for some reason, the girl started tossing and turning in her sleep and whispering, "No, no, please." They gathered in the room. What should we do? Ethan looked at William, who thought and remembered. Once, Momo said to him that if he ever needed help, the kind that he could provide, William should just call him. William raised his head. Perhaps if the police are powerless here, we should turn to those on the other side. Florence was startled. Are you talking about the bandits? Where do we even find them? William pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Sam? Hello. This is... William? Of course, I recognize you. How is Archie doing? Everything is good. AJ goes to the shooting range and learns how to handle weapons. But you didn't call me at almost midnight for that, did you? No, you're right. I need your help, strong help. Are you in your village? And you know that too? I know everything. Yes, I'm here. Yeah, should I take my fighters with me? Yes, as many as possible. William was inwardly impressed by the bandit Momo. No extra words. We're coming out. The guys needed to warm up a long time ago, Momo said. William hung up the phone and Florence looked at him. Well, what? We'll have some tea. We'll have to wait for a couple of hours. An hour and a half later, several identical jeeps stopped at the house. William counted 6 of them. Only Momo and 3 others entered the house. Momo immediately hugged William and shook hands with Ethan. Momo. Ethan, he looked at Florence. Do the ladies know? A little bit. We'll tell them everything now. When William finished his story, Momo was silent for a while, and then he spoke. Do you know why I got into crime? It's because that bastard, the police chief at the time, was a detective who fabricated evidence, bribed witnesses, and instead of imprisoning his brother, he put my brother, who had a weak heart and was innocent, in jail. My brother only lasted a year in prison. It's good that you called me specifically. It's fair. We need to wake up the girl. I need to find out where it is. When Scarlett went out and saw the big bald men, she wanted to run, but Ethan managed to grab her. Don't be afraid. These people will help. Scarlett looked at everyone skeptically, but she still sat down at the table. Momo was talking on the phone with someone about the same police chief. He was kind of setting up surveillance on him. Caleb was at home. Apparently, he had not yet been informed about the incident. Momo's plan was simple. They would get as close as possible to the location of that same harem. Of course, the girl wouldn't be able to pinpoint it exactly, but they would still have to tell the chief that one girl had escaped. Only he could declare an interception plan, like she was a criminal. According to logic, the police chief should have gone to his lair, and that's where he would bring them. Momo had thought everything out correctly. Scarlett showed where she had jumped out. She remembered because there was an old traffic police station. Momo told the girl to hide, whether in a closet or a basement. And then he left, leaving 2 people for security, just in case. The next day, all the news on TV was about one thing. The police chief was caught in a terrible crime. They found him in his harem, naked, with an explanatory note tied to him. Someone called the main prosecutor's office and sent photos of the slaves to their email. Momo stopped by Williams for just a minute. He said, I want them to explain something to him in prison. Death is too easy for him. Scarlett turned out to be a very kind girl. She immediately took on all the household chores, and most importantly cooking, which William couldn't stand. She was summoned several times to give testimony. There was no one left at the police station. The entire new staff had been sent. After the trial, Scarlett said, Maybe it's time for me to go. I have already used your hospitality for too long. William sighed. He had already gotten so used to Scarlett living in his house. He even sometimes called her his daughter, although, in reality, she was more like a granddaughter to him. Maybe you'll stay a little longer? It's summer and there's nowhere to go to study anyway, suggested the speaker. Scarlett laughed. What studying? Are you kidding? I need to work to survive. Scarlett, haven't you ever dreamed of becoming someone? Asked another person. I have. I always wanted to be a doctor, a pediatrician to be exact, replied Scarlett. At this point, William couldn't hold back any longer. Scarlett, stay, I'll help you. You'll go to study. Consider me your grandfather, who's found you. Scarlett looked at him astonished. But, just then, Florence stormed into the room like a whirlwind, as she always did. Scarlett, we want to offer you to stay with us. Where else are you going to go all alone? And Scarlett burst into tears, leaving Florence flustered. Did I say something wrong? No, it's all right. You're all just so kind, replied Scarlett. Scarlett stayed with William, and in the fall, with his help, she enrolled in college. At first, it was very difficult for her, and she lacked knowledge. But by the third year, it was like a second wind had opened up for her. And on the last year, she met Florence's grandson. They fell in love, and Scarlett realized she couldn't live without him. Florence's grandson refused to leave his grandmother, so the village gained a new family. William suggested that the young couple move into his apartment, but they said they wanted to be close to their relatives. When William and all his new family members welcomed Scarlett back from the maternity hospital, he suddenly realized that he was now living a very happy life. No, he was happy before, but this was a completely different feeling.